Let's go ahead and dive right in. So, the whole purpose of this workshop series is to respond to the moment that we're in right now. There's 2020 has not been a great year. I think a lot of us would agree with that, right? Coronavirus is presented these unprecedented challenges, and we've seen recently in the uprisings related to the Black Lives Matter movement that now more than ever is the time that folks need to rise up, and we need to demand change and policies that are really things that folks have been arguing, activists that have been arguing for ages. We really need that now. There are no more excuses. And so I think a lot of you all feel similarly. That's why you're here. And so my organization, the Youth Activism Project, started to talk with Youth Creating Change about how we can seize the energy of the moment and keep that momentum going. And so the Youth Activism Project, we're all about how we can get teens, young folks involved with policy advocacy and community organizing. And so that's kind of the perspective that we're coming from. And I'll go ahead and pass it off to someone from Youth Creating Change if they can talk a little bit about what you all do in Montgomery County. Maybe Olivia, would you like to speak?
Hi, so my name is Olivia Japong. I am the current president of YCC. So Youth Creating Change is a countywide social justice organization that is aimed at empowering our local student activists, although due to COVID and our trainings being online now, that will probably expand to national and international student activists. So we connect our student activists with access to grants of up to $2,000, mentorship from experienced social justice activists, the chance to network with other activists, as well as elected officials from our school board and elected officials at the state and national level. And we also connect them to, or we also hold grassroots organizer trainings, typically once a month at a high school, but again, probably online for at least the first semester of our school year this year. But YCC has been in existence for around 2 years now, and we've been able to help more than 60 projects, so probably more than 120 fellows combined. Being a fellow is actually how I got involved with YCC, and it was an experience that totally changed my life, and is why I joined the leadership team and am now running the program. So we have not just these trainings, but a lot of other exciting initiatives in store. I put my email and phone number in the chat in case you'd like to reach out to me and stay involved with YCC past these trainings. And once you kind of get your project more solidified after this wonderful training series, if you'd like to continue to develop your project through YCC, we would be more than happy to help. More about me, I'm a rising senior from the Silver Spring area of Maryland, so about 40 minutes outside DC for those of you not from here. And I'm super thankful to Anika and YCC's grassroots organizing team, Luca and JD, that's primarily you guys, for pulling this all together. So thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Olivia, for that really great introduction and for opening your YCC up to also supporting folks that are not from the Montgomery County area. So, so just to reiterate, right, Youth Activism Project, we're a DC-based organization. YCC is from a community right outside of DC, for those of you all that are unfamiliar with the area. But we figured, since we're all online, we might as well open up this workshop series to folks that are outside of the DC area as well. So we're really excited for those opportunities for you all to kind of get to know each other, see what's happening in different parts of the country, and just build this collective power, right? And so I can talk a little bit more about myself, since I'll be doing a lot of the training throughout the 6-week session. And I always think, and something that you all will learn as well, is that as you're leading social change efforts, it's really important for people to understand who you are, what calls you to the movement, basically, and why you do the work that you do. So I actually was a co-founder of the Youth Activism Project back in 2004 when I was 12 years old. And I often say, I became an accident by complete activist. The woman who founded the Youth Activism Project today is actually with us. And if you're lucky to have her as a facilitator, then she'll probably be quiet. Maybe she won't mention it when she's there, but I'm not going to put her on the spot. But basically, she invited me and my friends to a meeting one day to talk about the girls' education crisis around the world, and asked us if we wanted to be architects of a movement. And I did not expect to be asked that question. I went to the session to kind of learn, but not necessarily act. And so having an adult really like see something in me and treat me as an equal was really empowering at that young age. And before I knew it, I was walking on the marble halls of Congress in my red Converse sneakers, trying to advocate for legislation, and eventually was part of a movement that passed $200 million for the foreign aid budget for education. And so I'm 29 now, and I still say that that was the most empowering experience of my life. And so that's something, if you're new to activism, we want you to experience those successes as well. And if you're kind of an old hat at it, we want you to be re-energized and recommitted to the movement. So let's go ahead and dive right into what the flow of today is going to look like. So we started off with some introductory remarks, and then we're going to kind of go into what a movement is exactly. What is a social justice movement based off of what you understand, and then kind of start with like an overarching framework so that you guys can start to understand what's required for successful movement, right? And to be clear, we're expecting you all to leave this series to be movement leaders in your communities, right? And so we believe that you all have the capability to start that one spark that will inspire others to action. That's really what, that's how I think about a movement. And I'm curious to hear what you all think as well. Then we're gonna kind of talk more about these, we'll talk about movements theoretically and then bring them to experiences of some folks that are with us today, who are also, they're all, either high school or college age too. And then we're gonna move into a very tangible kind of experience of the workshop, which is how to set goals. And we decided to kick off this workshop with the goal setting exercise because that's really foundational to any successful movement building enterprise, right? Like we want to talk about the macro of what movement building is all about, and then we also want to get into the nitty gritty of like what it actually takes to get there. And then we're going to close out with some ideas of like what the next couple of workshops are going to look like, and any questions that you may have. And so throughout the session, I really want you all to use the chat function and also use, I think we have like the hand raising function enabled. And so, or wait, do we have that enabled actually? Yeah, so, or like we have a thumbs up thing. So can everyone, like, if you go into the participants list and then you see like, underneath all the names, there's yes, no, et cetera, we have like a thumbs up. Can you put that thumbs up so we can see if you're, you guys are facile with that? Okay, see a lot of folks. Oh, we do have the hand raising function too. So I see a lot of folks putting up the thumbs up and the hand raising. And if it's hard for you to figure out, and if you really want to say something during a interactive portion, please go ahead and you can hop off of mute, or you can also put yourself in the chat. And we've all had experience with that as well. So please, we want as many ideas on the table, and it's going to be hard to do that with in a 2-hour session, but I'm optimistic, right? So that's that. Use the chat and the hand raise function or the thumbs up. And then, be willing to have your ideas challenged and challenge other people's ideas. It might be hard during this first session, but over time, hopefully that's something that we can be comfortable doing. And then also, we're gonna provide some supports for how you can continue this learning outside of the session. So without further ado, let's go ahead and just in the chat, if you can put in why social movements, what social movements are, what do you understand about social movement theory, social movement, like in practice, and then why are social movements necessary? Why do we need social movements? So please go ahead and drop your answers in the chat. Or if someone wants to take a stab at this question, feel free. All right, so we see a couple of things in the chat. To bring justice to our unjust society, that's really great. To to educate people on important issues, to bring about change and understanding, lead to policy change and legislation. You know, it's all about, yeah, we have a lot of injustice in the world, right? I see a lot of answers here talking about these injustices and talking about the necessity to challenge the status quo. And so, yeah, that's exactly right. Spread awareness on issues. Wow, we have some really incredible answers. To hear from all people is a great answer. I like that. I'm sorry I can't go through every single answer, but yeah, these are really great. And so what are some social movements that you're familiar with, either historically or in present day? Abolition, the movement for abolition. The civil rights movement, of course, right? That's the one movement that I think a lot of Americans really point to as sort of emblematic of what movement should be like. And then we see BLM as the Black Lives Matter movement as the extension of that. So the suffrage movement for women's rights is very much connected to the women's rights movements of today. Progressive era movement, yes, exactly, right? So let's go ahead and kind of start to think about, you know, all of these social movements. What are some things that they all had in common, right? The work that I'm about to go into is built off of the work by a political scientist by the name of Zeynep Tufekci. She has this book called Twitter and Tear Gas, which I highly recommend folks read. And she talks about, well, 3 powers. I'm going to talk about 4 powers that are necessary in every single social justice movement. And so we have, we need narrative power, which is the power of storytelling. We need electoral power, which is the power of the vote. And then we need disruptive power, which is the power in which folks are able to stop the normal workings of society in order to bring about change. And in order to really make a stand with all of these powers, the backbone of all of that is people power. So let me go a little bit into like what all that means. So again, narrative power is the ability to attract public attention and or introduce new issues and solutions into the political debate. And so we have some of the most, if we had a little bit more time in the session, we're running a little bit short, I asked folks to kind of like try to unpack what this is, but I'll just go ahead and give some examples. I think today, one of the incredible instances of narrative power we see are with like the Black Lives Matter movement and the Me Too movement. And so in these days, with the benefit of social media, we have the power of hashtags, which we could use to really put out stories, put out narratives, put out one-liners and sound bites where people can really share their experiences about a particular oppression and raise awareness through the power of that narrative. And so we see, you know, hashtag Black Lives Matter, hashtag Me Too have ushered this whole, you know, moment where folks from different parts of the country are coming up, for example, with these these Instagram pages where folks are talking about their experiences being Black at a particular school, Black at a particular institution, also experiences of women with having experiences with sexual assault. And we see that everywhere. So this is an example of the narrative power that we're seeing in the movement that movements can build, right? And if you have any other examples of narrative power in the civil rights movement or what have you, please go ahead and put that in the chat as well. And then electoral power is the ability to punish or reward elected officials at the ballot box. So we see a lot of these headlines saying young people are going to be deciding elections and deciding victories. That's all you. Like, you all have that power, right? If there are elected officials that are not doing their jobs, you have the power to be able to mobilize enough people power, which we'll go into again, to make sure that they, you know, that we have the right people in office, and then the people that shouldn't be in office are not. And then disruptive power is, you know, anything like when you're coming up against opposition, whether it's inertia or it's flat out opposition, what can you do to make sure that political and economic institutions are listening to you? And so some examples of that include boycotts, protests, sit-ins or die-ins. Those are kind of more kind of drastic measures of disruptive power, but disruptive power can also look like going to a city hall meeting and bringing a bunch of people for a local to lobby for a local bill. Elected officials don't see that kind of turnout, right? That is disruptive. Clogging someone's inboxes with different messages about increased funding for education, for example. That is an example of disruptive power as well. It doesn't have to be like you're shutting down streets either. You have to understand what the level of inertia or opposition is in order to figure out what like the right amount of disruption would be and what the correct and sometimes it's respectful is required if you have allies, right? And we can go more into those nuances as we continue. So, okay, so that's a brief primer on kind of how to think about social movements. We'll talk about disruptive narrative and electoral power throughout these sessions. But we'll go ahead and kind of ground it more into detail with the panel. So I'm going to go ahead. Oh, sorry, I forgot to even talk about people power. So people power is, and what we hinted at it throughout. It's basically, the ability that everyday citizens can use to exercise political pressure, right? And everyday citizens are the ones that are creating these stories, creating these narratives, sharing these narratives. They're protesting and they're showing up at elections to make sure that justice is served, right? And so let's go ahead and see this in play with our advocacy and action panel. I'm going to go ahead and kick it off to Lulit Shawan, who will introduce herself and then kind of start off with the first question, and then we'll for everyone else, if you have questions throughout the process, please go ahead and put that in the chat. And then also, if you want to ask a question, you can put a thumbs up or raise your hand. And so Lulit, go ahead and take it away.
Hey everyone, so glad to see the large turnout today. So I'm Lulit Shawan, as Nika said. My pronouns are she, her, and I've been working with the Youth Activism Project for around 4 years, since I was a sophomore in high school when our president came to my high school and basically told us that we have the power to build a coalition and base it around our passions. And so that's what I've been doing for the past 4 years. I served on the executive board of the Youth Activism Project for the past year, and now I am program coordinator. And basically what that entails is working with groups like you all and doing stuff like the training series to do more hands-on interactive work. So very glad to be here. I'm going to direct some questions to our panel about what we just talked about. So the first question is, well, first introduce yourself before you answer the question. The first question is, how have you built narrative, electoral, and disruptive power? And please try to keep your answers to around 3 minutes.
Every wedding, somebody's gonna play that record. If you have a song that hits in that lane, then it's gonna get continuously played.
I think I can go ahead and get started. But before I do, I just want to remind people, if you could please put yourselves on mute, because I think I heard like something else in the background. But I'm Avery Smedley. I'm the lead organizer of Students Toward Equitable Public Schools. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having me on the panel. As the name kind of implies, I'm working on education equity, especially as it relates to the intersections of racial equity. And to answer that question about narrative power, electoral power, disruptive power, that's the structure that like my organization, Students Toward Equitable Public Schools, has been following. In terms of narrative power, we share a lot of our stories to get like public attention around what we're doing. I know in the past we had like student blogs to talk about our experiences with diversity in schools, or the lack of diversity due to segregation, and that got lots of attention from the community, and that was really great to like get attention back on that issue. In terms of electoral power, although we can't vote, we were heavily involved in the Board of Education election because we know how important that is, influencing like education equity in our county. And in terms of disruptive power, we like, because of coronavirus, like we haven't done like lots of things in person. but like we have supported like protests and Black Lives Matter movement and things like that. And we've had like Zoom calls with lots of community members. I know at one point we had a panel with elected officials and police chiefs, and we had so many community members there just like airing their grievances, just to show like a physical display of like, these are all the people in the community that care about this issue. So you really need to like step up and do something about it, because we're all here and we all have so many concerns around that. So yeah, great question. Thank you.
Yeah, I can jump off of that as well. My name is Uma Fox. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a international human rights activist, but I also run the organization Youtheria, which really in essence is an organization about narrative power. So what we do is we have students from 40 countries around the world who get together to talk about social justice and create miniature movements and miniature forms in their own communities of community advocacy projects after talking about these international and intersectional issues. And so we focus a lot on how to best tell your story and how to best tell your story in a way that's both internationally accessible, but also closely tied to your own community. I also, in personal time, as an LGBTQ plus rights activist in kind of the field of human rights, have led advocacy days at the Maryland State House as a form of both electoral power and legislative power. And while I haven't done as much with disruptive activism, just for the sake of kind of activist context around the world, because that's often something that's not necessarily the most accessible in an international context, it's something that I've spent a lot of time helping students create and kind of envision in terms of doing it after these discussions we host.
I could speak now. Hi, everybody. My name is Luca. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm one of the co-founders of MoCo Students on Climate, which is a local student-led advocacy group. Essentially, we're trying to influence local political action on the climate crisis. And we've also done some stuff on like the national level. We've been involved in protests and the DC climate strike. And I'm also a grassroots organizer for Youth Creating Change. So I've kind of been involved in the intersectionality in the wide array of students and their interests. And so for MoCo on Climate, there's kind of, the climate crisis is an issue that is, inherently impacting all young people. I mean, we are going to face a climate crisis in the future, and I think we're facing a climate crisis right now. So just in that sense, we are all kind of impacted by it. So we've really built kind of a movement around the fact that students are going to be impacted, and so we kind of need to step up and make some change in our local communities, and in ways that we feel like we can influence policy change the best. And regarding electoral power, we've also been heavily involved, like students towards equitable public schools in the local Board of Education election. And the Board of Ed is kind of where we do most of our work. And then regarding disruptive power, we've done letter writing campaigns to county council officials. I wasn't directly involved in that initiative, but some of my coworkers were. And we've also done a rally, like I mentioned, on Capitol Hill, on the DC climate strike. And we also did a petition delivery at the MCPS Board of Education in September. So, yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Manuel Tesche. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am from Chelsea, Massachusetts. So I am mainly involved in the work for inclusion of immigrants in the society of the United States. And the reason why I got involved, or I am working towards getting to the goal in which everybody listens to the voices of the immigrants, is because it all started out, it was senior year, when my teacher and some other classmates got into, the idea of getting graduation outside. And the reason was because my school used to hold graduation inside in a gym, and it limited the amount of people that could attend graduation. This meant that a lot of parents would not be able to watch their kids graduate. They would be either locked out of the gym, or they would be sent to the auditorium in which they would look at their children graduate through a screen. So we started, gathering momentum by talking to my other classmates. We spread out the word through social media. And, this was the way we were able to kind of exercise that narrative power, because when we went to the city council meetings, we explained what the problems were with holding graduation inside. Their reason why they wanted to hold it outside was inside was because they had just renovated the field, and the field was worth $3 million. So they didn't want to put any chairs that would damage the field. Our advocacy kind of focus on trying to get a protective mat for the field, so that we would be able to hold graduation outside and allow anybody to go watch their children graduate. But the process through which we were able to do that was through exercising that electoral power. And this was because, we went to those city council meetings, and we essentially told them that, our parents are going to be voting soon as well. And, we want this to be made happen. So we went to multiple meetings. The process was about a 6-month duration. And that was also kind of involved with the disruptive power, because we went to the city council meetings, to school board meetings. We kept telling them that this needed to happen, and it was a consistent effort. At the end, the city ended up approving a budget of $170,000 just for the graduation of the class of 2019. And it was how we were able to get graduation to be held outside. Everyone was able to attend. There were no limitations as to the family members who could attend. And the reason why this has to do with immigration is because Chelsea is a city that's 67% Latino. A lot of immigrant families that come to this country that are not represented because they weren't born inside the border. So it's kind of the reason why I am now fighting for that inclusion of immigrants in our society. Because as it stands right now, there's not a lot of noise from our voices, and I think that needs to change. Thank you.
All right, thank you panelists so much for sharing. I'm glad we have such a wide array of issues represented in all of your work. So now I'm going to take this time while we're waiting for the breakout rooms to be made to open up questions from all of our participants for our panelists. Any questions you guys have, you can put them in the chat. And I'll read them out.
There's a question a while ago from Amy Zai. Sorry, Amy, if I butchered your last name. She's interested in racial justice and educational equity. She asked, how would you recommend exercising disruptive power given the COVID-19 lockdown?
So if I can take that briefly from my experience kind of on the fringe of disruptive advocacy and often as an ally there, I would say one of the best things that people have campaigned about very successfully is flooding inboxes and using your power in the technological age to use technology to your advantage. I think a lot of time we forget that even during the pandemic, legislators' phones are still open, their email inboxes are still open, and I think they're spending a lot more time on that at this time because there's so much kind of contact that's being updated. And so even just beginning with emails or with flooding phone numbers or with hosting events for people to get together and both discuss plans for disruptive activism and then have phone call sessions can be really effective.
Okay, we have a question from Robin. How do you balance the need for disruptive with the need for the legislative/political portion to need a certain level of respectability?
In quotes, I'm being sarcastic about respectability.
I think I'll take this one. I think the way we balance out kind of what powers we use would be to essentially, there is an idea that we're trying to get out there. We're gonna make it be heard. First we're gonna try it out. They say it's gonna happen. I forget how they say it, but it's either we're gonna do it but in good manners, or we're going to do it in bad manners. If politicians wouldn't listen when we speak and we let them know what the problem is and we let them hear our narratives, and we essentially cry out to them what our problems, and if they don't listen, then that's when we go for the disruptive power, to show them that we also have that electoral power as well, that if they don't listen to their community, if they do not represent their community, then they essentially do not deserve to be in the position they're in.
And well, yeah, that's a great answer. I'd also like to add on to that. I think that in advocacy, and especially for like really pressing issues such as climate and racial justice and educational equity, there's after certain events, like for example, the killing of George Floyd, there are certain windows in which you can exercise certain, powers. Like right after the killing of George Floyd or Breonna Taylor, what people did was immediately take to the streets, and filling that window with the disruptive power is essential. But then right after that, it's very important to follow up with legislative and electoral power and really taking out people who aren't meeting the needs of the movement. So then I really think that there's certain windows in which you fill each window with a certain type of power. And I think that's the most effective way.
Okay, question from Wendy. With the election only 200 days away, are there extra powerful tactics to influence those running for office?
One thing that I know students toward Equitable Public Schools has used is the power of endorsements. Endorsements actually have a lot of power. So for people who are running for office, if they do not meet the needs of your movement, if they aren't advocating for the things that you want to advocate for, then endorse somebody else or don't endorse them. I was surprised seeing how much power my organization had in terms of like endorsing people, and people actually caring about like what like the student organization had to say and like the Board of Education. So you would be surprised to see how much power you really have. And it makes it easier for voters too, if they care about a particular issue, for example, education equity, they might look to a group like mine and say, oh, like if this candidate doesn't have this endorsement, then I'm not going to vote for them.
Question from Ella. How do you find the intersections between different social movements if you want to be involved in multiple? Kind of went along with the question I had myself with, if you have multiple passions, how do you narrow down your issue area and translate that into different types of goals?
I think really I can take this, that the first thing you really need to do if you have multiple passions, and intersectional movements are really necessary and really great. They are a lot more effective and a lot more accessible than ones that are only one issue focused. And I think first and foremost, kind of think about who you are as a person and what you're connected to. I know for me, I'm queer, I'm a woman, I'm biracial, I'm South Asian. And so those were all things that I could connect to, and I thought I could incorporate in my own activism and in my movements. And so I think it's about how you present yourself. So making sure that when you're creating movements, your leadership team has diverse experiences and diverse passions and diverse backgrounds in the field of advocacy. And then also when you are presented with opportunities, to make sure that you feature and discuss connected topics. For me, a good example of that was that I co-wrote one of the country's first LGBTQ+ studies curriculums. And for me, a priority was also including information about how queerness is connected with decolonization and post-colonialism. And so it's really about, when you are presented with opportunities, making sure to highlight how they are connected to other issues, and from that creating a diverse coalition that can tackle multiple things.
Yeah, and if I could add something else to your answer, Yuma, that's how you pronounce your name, right? Would you mind repeating it for me?
Yeah, Uma?
Uma, okay. Yeah, so currently what I'm focusing on again is immigration, inclusion of immigrants. And as being so broad a term, it essentially connects to every social injustice that there is in the United States. We Latinos also suffer from mass incarceration. The way ICE detention centers just essentially snatch people out of the streets. You know, they put them in facilities which have inhumane conditions. So that goes to you know, the civil rights, human rights, and you know, we're also part of the LGBTQ community. We suffer from an array of injustices for just, you know, being a group of people that just has that hope that one day things will get better. You know, being the reason why a lot of people come from their countries is because their countries are not offering them something humane. They are not offering them hope. So we come to the United States with that hope that things will get better. So seeing how there's a lot of issues connected to the immigrant community, what I'm hoping to do is that, you know, I will get involved with the movement that's you know, closer to me right now, the one that I plan to work on, and then subsequently kind of start working and branching out on the other movements as well. Because I think that one of the things that I've seen is that a lot of movements kind of don't usually work with each other. They're kind of, you know, focused mainly on their issues. But I think if we were to all work together for to call out all the injustices that there are, and kind of unifying that people power to create kind of one unity, it would be a tremendous amount of power, and it would be a tremendous amount of change that we would also be able to make. Yeah, I think when there's a lot of opportunities, you kind of have to grapple and take as many as you can so that you can make the biggest impact you can as well.
If I can add a little too, I guess that's such a great question. It's really difficult. I'm passionate about a lot of issues as well. But I guess when I thought about it, for me, I really wanted to find what I thought was the root. And looking at like the root cause of like opportunity and racial injustice, I felt like it really boiled down to education. And even too, it connects to other issues in that if you are ensuring that like marginalized groups get education, then they can later get positions of power in our society and make those changes. So for me, I was kind of thinking of like the intersections and, oh, like what's the root of this, where I can like cover so many issues and make so much change just from like this one standpoint.
All right, thank you guys. Very important question from Lily H. With so many ideas and things to change, how do you know whether you're trying to do too much and whether you're overworking yourself or not? So basically, how do you avoid getting overwhelmed?
So I've personally experienced this. I've been involved in quite a few groups. Like I mentioned, I'm part of YCC, also climate advocacy. I have my own mentorship program for ESOL students at my former middle school. And I'm also involved with Avery's group, the Educational Equity Group. And so I've definitely felt that before. I feel like sometimes I'm definitely getting overworked. And I think you can kind of figure out when you're getting overworked because maybe you're not showing up to enough meetings in certain groups. Sorry, my cat is like yelling. Or you're not putting in as much effort for each group. So I've personally experienced that, and I've kind of taken on less responsibility in certain groups and given my time to the groups that I've kind of already committed myself to. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a certain space where you feel like you're being overworked. And I think that's when you kind of need to tone down and kind of keep doing what you're already doing.
Yeah, I think just adding on to that, one of the things I found really effective is delegating and doing it in a way where there's accountability. I know for me, for the past couple of months, I and maybe 5 other people have been running a full-scale international organization with about 270 involved students. And it gets to be a lot, and it gets to be draining when in addition I have schoolwork and work and internships, etc. And so with that process, I think all of us were realizing that we were starting to get burnt out. And so we made the choice to split it into chapters. And so we now have more local chapters and regional chapters who are able to manage more of the logistical aspects that we had to handle as well. And so it's really about making sure that you create organizations that have a structure that's accommodating to people's mental health, and that you can incorporate successful practices and self-care into it to make sure that people have a balanced workload and that they do not feel as if they're spreading themselves too thin.
One thing I would add too is not being afraid to like step away recently this year, I've been doing a lot. I was involved in a lot of organizations because there's just so much that I wanted to do. But I did have to take a step back and like actually leave a few organizations because I realized too, like if I'm stretching myself so thin, I'm not being as efficient and as helpful to all those other organizations. So not only does it hurt you, but if it makes you feel better to like leave, like it hurts everybody else too. So just you are the movement. So like take care of yourself to take care of the movement.
Yeah, if I could add something to that as well, is that recently I've also experienced that kind of feeling a little bit overwhelmed. I was involved in two political campaigns, and I'm still, local campaigns that I'm helping out currently, as well as, having a full-time job as a paralegal for an immigration firm. And having to juggle with that, as well as the family as well. My sisters, two of them got severely sick with COVID-19. They were hospitalized. One was for a month and a half, and the other one was for almost a month. So I kind of had to deal with the hospital, call the doctors, speak with them. Then the aftermath as well. They're fine now. They're back to work, which I'm really happy about. But like Avery said, that you have to take care of yourself. You are the movement as well. I think that mental health is the #1 priority. If you're not okay, if you're not feeling well, you're not going to be able to reach the point and the full potential which you are capable of. So always taking care of yourself, being that the priority should be kind of the first step of everybody, and then kind of seeing how much you can do aside from that.
Thank you guys so much. Those are great answers. Also, would just like to tell the panelists, I know we're not going to get to all the questions, so if you want to privately answer them in the chat towards anyone, that's highly encouraged. Thank you guys so much for all your great questions. Next one is from Grace Edwards. In my school, there isn't a culture of social justice and awareness. How would you suggest going about creating that culture? How do you coalesce people under a common goal?
Grace, I totally understand where you're coming from. I think at least where I go to school at Einstein, there wasn't like huge like social justice culture, but what I did do, I worked off of like existing structures. So for example, with my school's Black Student Union, we didn't do a lot of advocacy. It was mostly just like a social club, but I wanted to change that. So I got a leadership position. I got in the leadership and I got up and I switched things up. I talked to the principal and I spoke with the other members of leadership talking about, hey, like how can we also use this as like a vehicle to advocate for ourselves externally. So I think like it helps to like find like-minded people, but also like it doesn't hurt to use like existing structures. So that was like pretty helpful to me.
The way we were able to work out our movement for outside graduation was everything started with, 2-3 friends. And, we talked about kind of what were the problems, that were affecting our community. And we essentially started branching out of, just friends. It started out with a group of 2-3 students, and kind of we started getting the word out, as friends. I would talk to one person, then this person would talk to another, and kind of start spreading throughout the whole school, as well as keeping up that social media presence. That was definitely the key. Yeah.
Grace, if I could just respond to your question. I personally at my school, for the issue I'm passionate about, climate change, I think there was a lot of like built up interest, but there wasn't a way to like channel that interest and use it for effective action. And obviously I can't speak like for your school. I don't know if there's built up passion about certain issues. But at my school, there was a lot of interest about climate justice, and we held a walkout to go to the nation's capital and Congress, and there ended up being like 100 people who wanted to walk out of school, and I did not anticipate that. So I think sometimes it's really important to kind of just provide people with opportunities to channel that interest, and even if it's just like a few people that show up first, I mean, it's a good way to get things started.
Yeah, I think in addition to that, one of the most important things is to make the issue tangible and to connect it with your local school community. a lot of the things we discuss are really big concepts and have a lot of intersections to them and a lot of context, but putting it in your local context is super important. One of the things I've done a lot of work with is making sure that in Maryland State House, that there's going to be equal access to menstrual hygiene products in public high schools and in restrooms around our state. And one of the things that really helped with that fight was making it something that students knew about first and foremost, but also connecting it to a world that they could imagine. Like imagine our school with this, like with these kind of free menstrual hygiene products, imagine what it would do for your life and connecting it to something that's close to home for them. I think we often kind of talk about a lot of advocacy goals in a very abstract sense. So making it something tangible and something they can relate to is really necessary as well.
I think we have time for one more question before we go into breakout rooms.
Okay, for this last question, I'll do one a lot of people agreed with from Ella Harris. I don't know if this makes sense, but there are so many student activist groups rising and so many students doing so many great things. I at least feel like I'm experiencing imposter syndrome. How do you recommend not feeling invalidated with what you are doing in comparison to others?
If I could just ask, could you repeat the question, please?
Okay. There are so many student activist groups rising and so many students doing so many great things. I at least feel like I'm experiencing imposter syndrome. How do you recommend not feeling invalidated with what you are doing in comparison to others? And I'll put it in the chat if you want to see it again.
I mean, I've definitely felt that sometimes. There's a lot of like amazing activists in my school system. So sometimes I kind of feel like envious of their efforts. But I mean, everybody has different limits. Everybody has, different passions, as simple as it sounds. I mean, you just really have to focus on what really is burning in your heart and what you feel like you want to do. And for me, that was climate justice and ESOL inequity. And I felt like and also educational equity. And I feel like if you try to emulate what other students are doing and like try to do the same thing because it looks like cool or something, don't do that. I mean, you're gonna, like Avery said, you're gonna spread yourself too thin and you're gonna be hurting the movement if you're not genuinely passionate about it.
Yeah, I think the other thing is we so often, especially as new activists, try to kind of play ourselves down and undersell ourselves by saying we're not qualified enough or we're not qualified as this other person. But I think also remembering that in terms of social justice history, most movements have not been founded by professionals. Most people did not have qualifications going in to do the social justice movements they led, and instead were moved by passion, like Luca said. And so remembering that it's really not a competition, things have been done by amateurs or quote unquote amateurs that have been incredibly effective and successful, and we still see the impacts in our lives today. I think the other thing also that's really important is that if you do compare yourself or admire other activists, partner with who you admire. A lot of the time they might have more experience than you or have been given more resources or opportunities than you. And by partnering with them, you can also kind of get access to that and learn more about their style as well. And you might be able to teach them something too. And I think that's a good way to make sure that it's something really symbiotic and you're using your admiration for more than just comparison.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Uma. And that's because I myself, I don't really compare myself to anybody else, not even people who are doing great things around the country. And that's because as long, my nephew crying in the background, I'm sorry. The reason why I don't compare myself to other people, it's because I know that, the movement that I'm involved in or the other movements that I plan to be involved in as well are going to affect the lives of a lot of people for the better. And as long as that happens, as long as one person gets something good out of it, that's enough for me. I'm definitely not in it for the glory, as some might say, not in it for kind of, how look good on me, how many followers I'll get. It's definitely going to be kind of, something that I put my passion in, something that I, really put my effort in. Again, if it helps one person for the better, if it helps 1,000, doesn't matter as long as there's the one. I think that's all that matters for me.
Yeah, I absolutely understand that. Anika can tell you I very much struggled with like the imposter syndrome first coming onto the scene because I started this work as like a junior in high school, and a lot of my peers had been doing it since their freshman year. So I felt like very like insecure and unqualified, but I just kept my head down and did what I was passionate about. And then I looked up and I was like amazed by what my passion led me to. So honestly, just like following your passion, like working hard and just like looking back and just like seeing, like you'll be amazed what you can do. So like don't worry about it in the moment, just like see where it takes you.
All right. Well, thanks to all the panelists. If folks want to, we're gonna experiment. If you want to hop off of mute real quick and just like give snaps to the panelists, that would be really cool to kind of show them love. Great. So I have these breakout rooms ready. I really hope I tried to do to the best of my ability as possible to kind of get people in thematic groups. So I think this is going to work. I'm really excited about this. So our facilitator to student ratio is going to be 1 to 2 facilitators. There are some facilitators, I think they were there. I'm not sure if you're a facilitator or not, but I just paired you up with another facilitator if you didn't have the tag. So, so we'll have 1 to 2 facilitators per group and then 1 to 3 folks. So that means that we can probably have enough time to kind of work with every single individual to come up with their unique goals. So facilitators, take note of that change. Do we have any questions? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go into the breakout rooms first, and then we're gonna take a 5-minute break. Okay, so 5 minute, just like potty break or, stretch or whatever. And then we'll, we have still have a lot of ground to cover. So do you have any questions before I open all of the rooms? And if folks ever need any help, there's like a ask for help button. You can ping that, and then me or Louie are gonna be there. So any questions before I go into breakout rooms? All right, folks. Well, let's go ahead now. What we're going to do again is do some goal setting exercises. And so facilitators are going to walk you through exactly how to do that. And so we'll see you all out here in another 50-ish minutes. So enjoy. All right, folks, we're just gonna wait for everyone to come back in and then do a bit of a debrief. But I guess like while we're waiting, does anyone wanna hop off of mute and describe how that was? And then also folks can put in the chat too. How was that experience?
For me personally, it was awesome to be able to work with Anna and Cleo on their projects. They were working towards spreading awareness about the school to prison pipeline and just the intersectionality of race and education and how minorities often have unequal educational opportunities. So it was really awesome that they were so knowledgeable about their issue areas, and they picked up on the logic modeling and SMART goals processes right away. And it was really awesome to work with them, very inspiring. And I hope that they and others who are attending these trainings and hopefully the rest of the modules get to become YCC fellows, because it'd be awesome to help you keep your projects going and growing.
Awesome, so great to hear that. Seen a lot of great stuff in the chat about how it's really cool meeting people from all over. That's one of the things that I was super excited about this series, is that you all can connect and see how your issues are kind of similar, also different, but like, the root of it all is the same. We're all fighting for the same things, right? And so it's cool to share ideas that way, bring some stuff back into your community. Yeah, I see a lot of those echoes. Anyone else want to share something with their voice before we move on to kind of closing out today's session?
I'll say something. This is Nadia Hassan. I'm the founder of Young Leaders Institute, and I was working with three teens from Connecticut and from Silver Spring, Maryland, and they were all working towards education equity, which was, I thought, a very interesting issue to be working around, especially given the communities and where they live. And so we were able to get through all the SMART goals, and I too encourage them to keep this conversation going with their team even after this training. And I also offered to be a guide and a support afterwards. So I love the synergy that's growing here in this group. And I was the one that put the chat in the chat box that I hope that we can harness the power of all the talent that's on this group. And so if we could, you know, share a way to stay connected, I think that would be great.
Awesome, great. Well, that's a great segue into how exactly we can do that. I hope that there was some exchange of contact info so that groups can stay in touch with each other. We also, on our end, took note of like who is in each group, and we'll definitely follow up with y'all to make sure that those synergies are really being explored. So, you know, on that note, let's go ahead and just talk about how the rest of the 6-week session is gonna go, and how we can do to like, what we can do to make sure that all of these learnings are being applied and that we are all staying connected. So if you felt like, you know, this time was not that, like you could have done a lot more into digging into your logic model, figuring out your SMART goals, this is not the last time you'll be engaging with those concepts. As a matter of fact, we will definitely bring back SMART goals in a later session when we talk about call to action. And so, which is actually our final session. And so I'm gonna go quickly run through what our modules are gonna be like, and what you're gonna learn out of them, and kind of some expectations for showing up to these modules. So the next one, which is on next Sunday, same time, on August 2nd, is all about understanding your role in activism. So it's gonna be really grounding what we're doing in what we call an anti-oppression lens, right? And so how can you show up as an ally, and how can you show up as someone from a community that might be impacted by systemic injustice, right? So that's module 2. I also recommend, if you're more of an advanced activist, like this is this kind of work I feel like often gets lost when it comes to organizing and activism. So I encourage activists from all sorts of backgrounds to really come to module 2. Module 3 is all about how to manage a team, how to create a team, how to build relationships, because relationships is crucial to building people power, and knowing how to manage teams is also is also important for that people power. So even if you're a seasoned activist there, again, you know, you can probably learn a lot. And so that will be primarily led by our YCC team. And so they'll go ahead and introduce that on the August 9th session. Oh, and I forgot to mention that Uma, who I've seen a lot of snaps for her in the chat, she's gonna be co-facilitating module 2 with me. So you'll see more of Uma, which is always an amazing thing. Module 4 will be led by our friends at Young People for Progress, which is another Montgomery County organization. They're going to be talking about how to create an advocacy and/or electoral campaign. Really talking about building that electoral and that ties on to all of the movement building framework that we talked about. It ties to electoral, it ties to narrative, and it also ties to disruptive. And then we'll also talk about event planning and publicity. There we'll go into different types of events that you might consider, like such as protests, but not limited to protests as well. And then the final is just, you know, how do we take all of this? How do we get people and mobilize them into action? And so these modules are set up so that you can, and I see some questions about like, how do we sign up? And yeah, we will definitely be we'll have forms for this. For these modules, we definitely encourage you to sign up for each module, because we're gonna also break out into facilitation groups, and we need that head count. So it'll always be on this link, but we also want you to sign up for that as well. And so and the modules are set up so that, like, you know, if you're not able to come to one, or if you feel like we'll send out the information early on so you can get a sense of like what the module is going to be like. And if you feel like, oh, I kind of know these skills, I kind of want to skip out on, which, you know, I recommend a lot of these skills. It's always important to reinforce them. So come if you can. We also have the recording too available, but so they're sort of designed to be isolated, but they do also follow the same trajectory too at the same time. So that's how we're designing them. And so, and yeah, we will definitely have the information about, we'll constantly stay in contact. We'll text you, we'll email you if you put your number for texting. And we really encourage you to like invite, like we had 80, 90 people show up today. Like, you know, we because of the beauty of online, like we can make this even bigger. So we encourage you to share the forms for the later sessions with people that you feel like really should be learning these skills and being in this community. So speaking of developing that community, one thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna add everyone to our Slack channel, the Youth Activism Project Slack channel. So I'm gonna actually go ahead and put that link, put the invitation link in the chat. And if you're new to Slack, no worries. I'm gonna also send you I'm gonna email everyone like a tutorial on how to take advantage of Slack, make the most of it. And so I'm putting the link right now. Go ahead and click on it, make a Slack account, start building community, start introducing yourself. And then we'll also have, we'll make sure to indicate, we have certain groups in the Slack channel that are, you know, related to ed equity, related to racial justice. And so we'll make sure that those groups are up to date and that you can start going in those groups and working together. You can also probably create your own group specific to your to the group that you were working in your breakout session. And so we'll have that capability as well. And you can make that group private just to make sure, like, you know, you keep that learning going on. So that's the main thing. I'm going to share these slides so that you have access to this resources slide. Another thing that you should definitely check out is our Youth Activism Guide to Change. It basically goes step by step into how to launch and lead a campaign. So if you want like a head start on some of these concepts, that's where you go to do that. I've also linked the logic model worksheet and the SMART goals worksheet that you were working off today so that you can make your own copies and work with, if you're setting up groups, you can use that with your groups. Sorry, this is like, I'm bombarding y'all with information, but hopefully this is helpful. A final thing that I'll say is that if you're interested in educational equity, we're starting this process led by the students from Students for Equitable Public Schools, which is Avery's group. Avery, you want to describe what the Ed Equity Learning Group is like?
Yeah, sure. So in envisioning like this ed equity group, we really just wanted to make like the process of creating like education equity campaigns more accessible. So what we're doing is kind of training students across the country on like how to start their campaigns as we're like learning it too. So it's like it's very like non-intimidating whatsoever because like we're also going through that process. But yeah, I encourage everybody to join that if you're interested in ed equity. It's really great to learn from students who are like they've just been in your shoes and they like understand the passion, but also like what comes with like starting a campaign for the first time.
And I'm gonna go ahead and put that link in the chat as well if there are anyone that thinks like, I definitely would love a group to kind of work through these ideas with and meet with on a regular basis. And we could, if we have a lot of folks, if you can also write in like the additional comments or something, the group that you were in case we have like a lot of folks that are in the same group, we can put you there as well. And then finally, definitely check out the Youth Activism Project Instagram, where we're constantly having resources, sharing resources that are all about like how to get involved. And definitely check out the Youth Creating Change Instagram as well. They're a great model for how to create similar youth organizing, like groups that support youth organizing in your community. And so that would be like an incredible resource for you. So we're at the end of this session here, exactly on time, which I'm very proud of. So what I'll say is if folks have, if folks want to stay on, share whatever's in their heart, that's space for that. If y'all have any questions, there's space for that as well. If any facilitators want to stay behind and debrief, that'll be great as well. So we can do like up to 10 minutes for just share outs and questions from participants. And then beyond that, if we can have any facilitators who are able to stay to share any ideas. And if folks aren't able to stay, no worries at all. We'll definitely make sure that we capture how you're feeling in follow-up steps. So I will send everyone an email. You don't have to remember all of this. I'll make it very clear kind of what are all the different opportunities and how to make sure that your perspectives are being taken into account so that we make the remaining 5 weeks together really awesome. And yes, the application for Ed Equity, the Ed Equity Learning Group is still open. We're taking people on a on a rolling basis, and we have about 10 spots left. So I would hurry up and sign up for that if you are if you're interested in having that kind of resource. Oh, the other thing is there's also a $50 small grant involved with that. So I'm putting that out there in case that also motivates people to sign up. And then, yes, Amy, thanks for clarifying that. Unfortunately, the Education Equity Learning Group is only for non-MCPS students because we already have steps, right? The mission behind this learning group is to create similar movements in other parts of the country. So that's why it's only for non-MCPS students. But hopefully we'll have more opportunities for MCPS students that are similar to that as well. And then where do we find the information? I'm going to email everyone about that. Who's eligible? I mean, it's really if you're not, as long as you're not an MCPS student, which is Montgomery County Public Schools in Montgomery County, Maryland, then you're eligible. It's not necessarily only for high school students. I think that's the target demographic, but middle schoolers want to be involved. That works as well. But it is for folks that are 18 and under that are in the K through 12 public school system. And any other questions? Thank you so much, Robert. Thanks for joining us. Folks, if you have to leave, we really appreciate it making this community with you all. Thank you so much to our facilitators for making this really, I would say, a really successful first session. And I can't wait to see folks in our remaining sessions and just staying in touch in generally with the Youth Activism Project and Youth Creating Change. I don't know if, Olivia, if you'd like to say any final words as well from the YCC side.
Yeah, just thank you everyone for coming to this training today, and hopefully we see you at the other modules. If you could also spread the word about YAP and YCC to your friends and or peers that you know who'd be interested, that'd be great because we'd love to keep this going. And once you guys start having more concrete project ideas, we would love for you to apply to be YCC fellows once the application opens in late summer, early fall, so we can help you continue to grow your initiatives with support like grant funding of up to $2,000, mentorship, networking connections, and of course our grassroots organizer training series led by Luca and JD. So thank you guys. We would really love if we could support you as YCC fellows, and we hope to see you at the rest of these trainings.
So folks, if you want to stick around, have any additional questions, comments. Alex, I love that you're surrounded by people who are also starting movements. So I would love it if you would invite them to join our future sessions.
I'm just going to say that I really loved being a part of this. I loved every moment of it, and I'm going to be here in every single session. So do expect to see my face again. But I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.
Yay. Well, Manuel, it's so great to have you join us with this. And yeah, this is all about building that movement together, and we're all here for it, whether we're 10, which Alex, I think that's how old you are, or we're a little bit older than that, in our well into our adulthood.